So this is my interpretation of this Wealreaf law, and I think it's actually quite an accurate interpretation, although I'm not an expert, but I'm going to get an expert to translate it. I'm not satisfied with the current full translations. It's officially acknowledged, it's officially and widely acknowledged that it's concerning basically bodies and deceased persons who have died, and it suggests actually tombs or graves, right? Now it's part of the tomb of Rochester. Now Rochester Cathedral website they have an interpretation. Their interpretation doesn't even put the title of what it's called, Wealreaf, and they only really concentrate on this word here, Nipingi, and they say it's concerning outlaws. In fact, I don't even think that Rochdale website gave it any real accreditation for the taking of bodies. It makes it sound more like it could even be actually more to do with outlaws, right? Now, I don't think too many of these words are that difficult to translate, although I'm not suggesting that I've done it 100% correctly or even correctly, but I'm confident that most of these words have similar words or are used in other languages, except this here, which starts with an X. It looks like it's XLVIY, but I'm not sure about that. And this word here, which looks like Fakrat. And then we've got a lone letter H there. Now, there's quite a lot to say about this. This law is retained through the Great Charters. Now, I actually think that this is the law, the actual ancestral law that actually concerns all of the buried ancestors and tombs, but also of other dead persons who are buried or deceased, right? Because it's a big thing, particularly if you look at Ireland, all the tombs and burials, some of them aren't open, but a lot of them got raided and robbed. And it's interesting because my other research study to do with London and the tolls of London and the laws of the Great Charters of London led me to find out about treasure trove, treasure hunting, which the Liberty of London on the Charter apparently granted them the right to keep any treasure that they'd found, right? But it doesn't say where they got it from or opening any tombs. It claims if they find any treasure they can keep it. It encourages basically treasure hunting, and a lot of those laws in the London Charters are giving them a lot of benefits in legal certain legal immunities from countersuits and the privilege of having the magistrates in London dealing with their affairs, an exemption from tolls. I think that the conquering forces, I think that they actually really encourage a lot of it, and we end up in the sort of 1850s when photography has been introduced, and people are starting to get interested in the sites in Ireland, and a lot of those started getting robbed for treasures. I think that it was something that spread out. I'm quite sure before the conquest that these burial sites were actually retained. This is actually very important to the megalithic research group in Ireland, really, because they're really concerned about protecting a lot of their ancient sites that haven't been massacred, spoiled or opened. So I'm interested for the interpretation of this. I know that there are some records of the old Irish legal system and the old Irish laws, so perhaps someone in the Irish megalithic research group who understands the Irish language could look into finding a contemporary or similar law actually that had been handed down as far back as it goes, and there's more likely it being retained in the Irish archives in greater extent, because Ireland was free from conquest for a lot longer, and we might be able to actually possibly even find a counterpart to this in the Irish law, because this is meant to be from around 600 or onwards, some of these laws, which is from just after when the Romans went. It seems to be something that they were concerned about, but this is written in Old Scandinavian, so it's actually Danish or Norse or whatever. So now, and we think that this is mainly because of the invading Danish and Dane law to help reinforce protecting the ancient sites, but they, at that time, they were still actually burying some of their nobles and their ancestors, and the Norse people had a culture of this as well. We know that in Denmark and Norway, they had a similar culture of burying their ancestors. Well, they did in Gaul as well, in France, to a certain extent. So, I just want to go through my opinion, my own opinion on the interpretation of this, and see what you think to it. And I'm actually going to get a professional translator to do it, a fresh translation, because the thing is, if this is correct, what I think that it means, this has a lot of implications on a lot of things that have been happening, and possibly renders a lot of things illegal. And that's controversial because places like universities and research archaeologists, they like studying and researching these things, and they even say archaeology is destructive in its nature. But if there is a law that protects these things, and the main thing is that the main reason of all this is in current laws, in like the Burial Act and various other laws, they apply for exemptions and they apply for permissions in the name of education. But this law is in the Great Charters, and it's protected and preserved through the Great Charters. And so some of the laws are that you're not allowed to actually, there is no way that you can contravene the Great Charters. It's actually not possible. It's illegal. And any orders made against that are void and invalid. And also, if you try to repeal or change statute law as well, that would mean that you can't get permission. Now, the unfortunate thing is that a lot of these tombs have been robbed already and stolen and contaminated. So this was meant to protect them. Yet a lot of people went treasure hunting, through the 1800s, documenting it, even over in Ireland, and that's illegal anyway. The current Burial Act from the 1850s and onwards, it protects the opening of tombs. So if you can't open it, you can't get inside it to take any bodies or anything like that. But they claim that it doesn't give any specific protection to the actual bodies in wording, or necessarily the relics or treasure inside. But if it's illegal to open it or get in, then I can't see how you can, claim the treasure. Although, unless you don't say where you got it from, which is what I'm starting to find happened with London and the Charters. They created this, the Normans. And actually, I'm now starting to understand what happened to Old Sarum, like when they dug out the middle of it. And our ancient site here, it's an excuse to massacre and spoil the ancient sites and have a look around inside, see if there's anything there. So I think that this is connected to the Normans, but yet, later on, after the conquest, then they start to make these laws to say that they will uphold the laws of Edward the Confessor and the Charter of Liberties. But yet then they start to create these cities where they're free to any treasure they find, but it doesn't say they're getting it from burials or graves though. Although the thing with London is, there isn't much prehistory in London. It was meant to have been all, river and water, swamp. So it wasn't until after the Romans settled there, Londinium, when it really is more of a modern thing. It's not necessarily something out of the prehistoric England, so far as other places like Wiltshire or Cornwall or Scotland or Wales or anywhere like that. So I've been talking for 10 minutes now, but I'm just going to go through this, and this is going to be my opinion, and then I'm going to go get a professional translation. So there's only about 2 words that I don't really know what they are, and this X, the letter X is not in the it's not in the Viking or the Norwegian, the vocabulary. They don't have X, so that's definitely got a Latin influence on it. So we'll just see what we make out of it. I've done a lot of study on each word and the letters, so I think when you read this, I think it's correct. I think my translation's right. If I'm wrong, then fair enough, but I need to submit some sort of evidence. But I really think also, I just need to remember this as well, that besides the implications this has, this is a very, very, very controversial matter. I think it's a matter of great importance, because there could be a conflict of interest in law with the whole universities and academic sector. If this protects tombs with a religious capacity out of respect and dignity and the will of the ancestors, that would prevent the academic sector from messing around with it and getting involved. But they rely on, their work is investigating and looking into these places. So you've immediately got a religious conflict of interest. Now, the thing with the Archbishop of Canterbury and the thing with the Christian Church is that they're not great fans of the pagan cultures. There's no named religion for our island before the conquest, and they're more they do have a very strong tradition now of honouring the dead, knights of the realm, peers, people who were knighted, Sir Isaac Newton. All these type of people get memorials, they get respect, they get graves, they get special elaborate tombs and protection of their bodies and all manner of things like that. So the Christian tradition and all our past monarchs and rulers also, yet we have this blatant, so if they took this law for themselves, for the royalty and the legacy of the conquerors and all their awarded and decorated peers and colleagues, they would be using this for themselves to protect them. I mean, the police are even saying now that they don't want people painting on memorials. So they take this type of thing quite seriously when it comes to themselves and their own heritage, but not to the ancestors. I mean, for example, Tim Darvill at Bournemouth University is quite a character. He's pro Stonehenge Tunnel, and yet would he want to dig up Jimmy Savile's grave for investigative purposes? I mean, if it's protected out of a respect and religious site, which is the United Nations Religious Site Protection is supposed to protect religious sites anyway, they're wanting to snoop round and sniff around and poke around and have a look round, but yet there are more and more modern technologies emerging where you don't need to be disruptive and mess around with these things. So and the thing with the Archbishop of Canterbury and the ministry of the church is that they usually, their main field of interest is spirit, soul, the church, the Bible, graves, deceased, and that is their main area. But if there was a law that protected the pre-Christian deceased and the pre-Christian persons buried and their relics, then the church definitely don't seem to be wanting to give too much of a thorough translation of this. And if they did, are they protecting the interests of the education academic sector so they can go about their intrusive business? So is there a conflict of interest also within the church? And I'd probably put that question to the Archbishop of Canterbury and question him why his translation is not that thorough or accurate on the Rochester Cathedral website. And I'd probably raise that with the Lady Chief Justice because of the reason that she's actually in the Privy Council with the Archbishop of Canterbury, right? And the thing is that this, I know I'm correct about all of the great charters and this being actually valid, and what it all comes down to is the translation, right? It definitely says that all orders against the great charters are void. So I think that statutory instrument that's going to be wanting to dig out Stonehenge Tunnel, if there are deceased bodies under there that fall under this protection, this law could render the instrument void because it's against the Great Charter, even though the Secretary of State of Transport made it. And really the matter should be dealt with in Parliament, possibly even the Privy Council. So, I mean, I'm going to challenge the Archbishop of Canterbury on his interpretation if he has been intentionally misleading people on the importance of this and the translation of this for various conflict of interest reasons, as I've set out, right? So now I'll get into the wording. So to start with, Wealreaf, they call it Wealreaf, but the correct spelling's Wealreaf. And I think that word, I don't think you're supposed to read that just as the title separate and then start reading the law. I think the first word is part of the sentences, right? I believe this first word is that's an elaborate W in the actual scripture, but in the tome, I think that first word is inclusive in the meaning of the first sentence, right? Which goes to there with a full stop. And then we have this, and then another there. It's more or less two sentences, but you might say that it might be 3 or 4 sentences. So Wealreaf, I've started to realise that this is very, very synonymous with the will. The will. And I actually think that there are some connections to the wheel. On Stonehenge and in Newgrange, we have those spirals, those reels. Some people refer to them as reels. But the word, I think the word wheel is synonymous with will. And then reef is like a sheaf. So if you would cover something up and preserve it like in a tomb, it would be like a person's will, right? But also protected in a sheaf. Another interesting thing is that the word reef, wheel reef, or sheaf is similar to reef. When we talk about who named the coral reef, the reef is under the water, under the sea, and the coral is stiff and hard, almost like bones. We've got that word catacombs, which I start to realise the word cat is like a feline. If you think of the Colosseum and the lions and tigers they had fighting at the Colosseum, and then people who died, and those animals and cats raking in the sand, and the dead bodies, catacombs. Also the Sphinx also is sat by the pyramids, where it has its claws into the sand, into the earth. But also, when you're pulling a plough, you have an animal. Catacombs also can mean in some languages the cattle. So when the cattle are combing the land and raking the land, you can end up actually ploughing and digging up bones just through farming. Now the funny thing about the word Wealreaf, it's almost like the wheels. If you're going on a road, the wheels are perpetually kind of digging out these trenches, and you could end up with bits of stone or bone coming through, almost like a reef under the water, and almost like the wheel turning round is almost like the will of the wheel, the will of the cart. So that's not a specific translation, but all of those things are deviations or variations of the same themes that are contained within similar words. So, and it also is connected with the will as well. And we know now that people leave something in their will. So that is actually kind of just what I think is good for setting a context to start with. Now, this first part here, it's an I, a D and an E, and the E has like a phonetic on the top of it. Now the thing is that when you use these letters alone, both the I and the E, when used alone, refer to laid amongst or laid within or within a position. So that's almost like bodies or remains laid within or under the earth or in certain positions. So, and then the second word here, that I haven't translated the full word IDE, but if the letters I and E are correct in this Old Scandinavian, I think that first part there is going to be something to do with laid amongst, within or under, right? And then here we've got mortuary, which in most languages, mortuary or morbid is dead, right? So deceased. So I actually think that it's to do with the will and covered up, lying amongst under the earth and dead. And then here we've got revere or revere. Now I have to say that I haven't had these confirmed, right? This is my go at it. This is my attempt at interpreting it. This is with deep admiration or respect. So it would be with the will uncovered up amongst them, within, underneath, in positions, dead, and with respect, right? And then this E by itself actually is, there is an E at the end there, it means always or forever. And here the op means reveal or open or spread out. But here after that it says, we've got this Nipingi word. And on Rochester Cathedral, they claim that means outlaw, right? But when I search the word, it means more to do with disrespect or shame or along those lines of shameful or disrespectful feelings or actions or nature. So we've got a bit of a conflict of meaning. But then we've got the dot there, like the full stop. What I think this means is that it's the will of those who are left lying amongst, underneath, within and dead, with a deep respect and admiration, any, always and forever, any opening of it is outlawed or shameful or disrespectful, right? So that would first create the law of not digging up or disturbing the dead out of respect, right? And then this next part, this Sigfil, all of the research that I've found so far myself say this is to do with a sign or a seal or a symbol. Well, you do seal up these tombs or even a body, even when you cover it. Now the seal part, the sign, symbol or seal, well, you get the sign, symbol or seal in Newgrange and in Loughcrew and other of the Irish sites and other sites, right? And even some of those that were raided by Vikings, like up by Orkney or Isle of Man or the north of Scotland. But it also can mean that the thing is, the actual shape and form of the dolmens with the slab on the top, with the capstone on, is a shape and form of itself. And also the hill, you know, the shape of the hill. So it's the whole thing's symbolic, the whole tomb's symbolic, right? The whole thing, the whole structure, but also the positions sometimes that they're laid in, or even the relics, right? But anyway, it says here, now negare, from what I have found, is to deny, refuse, reject, say no, or disallow. All those words are connected with that. Disallow, say no, reject, deny. So that is basically to forbid. And then here, ularo. Now, I haven't confirmed this, but I'm quite sure that it's in connection with utero, like in the Nirvana album, in utero or in uterus, which is almost like in the womb or inside. Sometimes people connect that rebirth or the place of the other world or the religious experience with the sacrament to the rebirth, right? But so far it's inside or the feminine or within, right? Within, inside. So it would disallow you to go inside. So it would be the signs and symbols. Now the thing is, if the actual sign and symbol was a giant formation of rocks, which basically physically blocked you from going in, that would be a sign in itself. Or when you come across a blocked entrance, the blockage will be giving you a sign that they don't want anyone to go in there. It would be signifying that it was sealed, right? So that was to reject going inside, right? Now, I don't know what this word here means, fakrat. That's the main word that I need to discover what that means. Now, the letter H with a dot, I haven't found that yet, but in the Old Norse dictionary, what I did is I saved all of the words that would begin with H, right, whether they're short or long, and I collected them all together. And there's a theme there that all of the words, they're not all the same meaning, but they're all words that are kind of along the lines of having something in your hand or holding it like this, or kind of like together, two things together or come together, right? And then this CU, there's some spell it with a K, then a U with the hyphen thing on the top. That also means together with, but it can mean an animal, right? Now the thing is, there have been some burials found where people have been buried with their horse or with cattle. Some of the Danish burials or some of the Celtic burials in the east of England, they've actually been buried on their chariot with the horses pulling it, right? So we know that. So and obviously, I wanted to know in religious ceremony, like in funeral ceremonies or marriage ceremonies or christenings, where do we get all these sayings from? Well, we have the saying to have and to hold, right? So it's almost like they've got that to having to hold their things, because a lot of them are buried with their relics and possessions. So I'm going to draw attention to that to having to hold, right? Or actually for them to having to hold. Now, this is the problematic word for me here, because they don't have the X in these dictionaries. They don't have that letter. So here's an introduction of a Latin letter, and I don't know what that word is, but I just thought I'd mention that, right? Now, the tainif, I think that is related to tainted or to taint, which means to affect the reputation of, or possibly dishonour, or take on something. Obviously, a lot of these things are preserved when they're under the ground and protected from decaying as quickly or from rot and things. So obviously, you know, when you, it's like in what's the country in Italy? You know, like in Venice. Underneath Venice, all of the wood hasn't rotted, it petrifies. That's a tainting, you know. It gets turned into a stone. Like if you bring it up from out of the water, it starts to decay. So it's almost like contamination. But also you can have your reputation tainted. This is why the royals don't like anything bad said about them, or even the Privy Council have got an oath to not take any, you know, they're not even allowed to imagine the royals being tainted or doing anything bad or wrong, according to their oath. Obviously, so I think this is to do with having and holding or being together with their things. And then I'm not too sure of these words, and then we get into the reputation. Now this plain here, that suggests that it could mean whole, full and complete, right? So could that be reputation intact, but as well as all their things together with? And then the last word, what I seem to find look like nobility. So their state of rank, inherited rank, nobility or prestige or so forth. So complete prestige and status without any tainting or contamination together with their things. So that's what I think. So I think that this protects all of the old burials and tombs, just like the ones in Ireland or here or wherever, possibly even like in Norway, because they had them over there as well. And that would make sense, because why would they go to so much effort to build those things, right, if they didn't want them disturbed? So and when you get into the signs and scenes and symbols and the nobility and so forth, I think it's quite clear what it means, although I do need to check and verify these. Now, does that mean that it protects normal people as well, the normal deceased, anyone else who's just buried under the earth? Well, I actually think the first part is generally those who lie amongst the earth forever, always, now dead. We admire and respect them. Not to open or spread them out or dig them up is outlawed or shunned or it's disrespectful. And then, that's one word that we need to agree with, maybe with Rochester there, that it's outlawed. We're not talking about the outlaws are dead, but it's forbidden to disrupt it or disturb it. And then the rest of it would suggest then going on to the matter of the major burials and tombs. So that's where I am with it now. That's what I think, and I think this is actually important for the Irish research group, because that's their entire study field, their entire subject. But ironically, this would prevent people from poking around and messing around inside it. Now, you've got that very big burial in Ireland that a lot of people have been putting pictures of recently, right? And they're really proud of protecting that and not opening it. So we've got conflict of interest here. We've got the problem is the people who study these things and learn actually, if this is in Magna Carta and retained in Institute law and the Great Charters, which I think it is, it makes a lot of their work illegal. And you can't get permission or override it. You're not allowed. Because you can't, no order is valid against the Magna Carta. So we really are in conflict with people like Professor Tim Darville of Bournemouth University, who wants to open everything up and poke around in it and look at it. Yeah, we're getting new and new modern technologies where you can just have new types of waves and scans and machines to just have a look without actually physically poking around and pulling it apart. And there's a lot of things. I don't think a lot of these people are too intelligent. I mean, Howard Crowhurst's study and field of research studies the knowledge of these people merely from the positions of their things and what's written on them and where they are. And it opens up an entire field of study without damaging anything. And then you've got us, actual living ancestors who can actually speak and talk and breathe and interpret. You don't need to pull absolutely everything to pieces. And the thing with this is, it says that, in my opinion, they're supposed to. It preserves their identity and who they are, those people, and also it's respect. So separating them from their things, separating them from the relics, and breaking the peace is a serious religious problem, which the church is their specialist field of interest. When it comes to the royals and the knights of the realm, we've got to, keep all the statues clean and the rest of it, and not disturb Jimmy Savile's grave, with all his jewellery on him. Tim Darville's not going to wanting to dig up Jimmy Savile and have a poke around and investigate him. What else do they want to find out? There's a conflict of interest here. This protects, and the education sector want to need to disturb to survive. Now, if it's illegal and if it cannot be overridden in law, we've got a serious problem, because a lot of the university therefore are criminals, right? Criminals. And the church, if they're not telling the truth about the translation, yet they go about protecting everything else, the church have been compromising the ancient law of the Magna Carta and preventing it from being upheld. Maybe because they've been persuaded to the interest of the universities, or maybe they're not that bothered about pagan religions that came before. But now we're supposed to accept all religions, and we've got the United Nations religious site protection that no one seems to be using or calling up. So I'm using this when it comes to the Stonehenge Tunnel, because if there are large numbers of body and deceased, they're protected by this. That's my claim. So we need to get a proper professional translation. Can we trust these translators? Do the translators have a conflict of interest? Can you get the right translator or not? This is the question. So another thing worth saying about this, just to finish off with, is that really the Oxford University originated from monasteries and from religious centre. Obviously Cambridge was set up as well afterwards. So it's ironic that at the core of a religious institution are laws around protecting the burials of the ancestors and deceased, and then you got the churchyard itself, with all the graveyard. Yet the education centres, the degrees, the fields of study, the professors sprout and originate from this institution, and they're going around digging it up, apparently in the name of research, although we don't know what there is to research. What do they need to find out, that we don't already know? Is every single place need to be investigated and inspected, or do they only need to know enough to find out about general information? is someone, you know, is are the ancestor, are the future generations of Professor Tim Darvill going to be desperately, you know, in the future when all the landfills filled in with CDs and C90 cassettes and old computers and broken phones, will he be desperate to poke around in Jimmy Savile's tomb and find information out, precious information about his jingle jewellery, or, you know, pull his teeth out and, you know, find out exactly, you know, what information is there to know? A lot of this information, we've got all the writings of these people, doesn't seem enough. I think these people are hungry. They're hungry for more information for the sake of it. It's almost like painting the town. When you build a town, they don't know when to stop. You know, at one point you paint a picture and then, okay, I've painted the picture, now I need to stop. And then they put more and more on and they spoil it. I think that's what the education archaeology departments now are doing here. They're spoiling the history. And this is where we are with the Stonehenge Tunnel, you know, spoiling the whole landscape, you know, how many dead bodies are going to be brought up out of that. Ironically, the main part of this whole thing is the fact that because this is the part of the Great Charters now, it cannot be overridden or exempted. You cannot get permission like they're doing now. I mean, obviously, bodies are protected, you know, the dead's protected, but they seek consent and permissions. I think this has been overlooked. It's almost like the part of it that they didn't want to admit existed, you know, oh, you've got the burial acts and so forth, oh, you can't get into or open anywhere, but there's nothing saying actual remains aren't protected when clearly they are, for religious reasons. I don't think scientists have a religion. I think a lot of them are Scientologists. They need challenging on this, you know. I think they need challenging on it. It's about time we challenged them on it. It's very controversial in Ireland. I mean, you know, I think, you know, in Ireland, some people are desperately keen to do more research and learning, and others like protection of these sites. There's so much to learn that they haven't yet learned and don't know from non-invasive knowledge, research, procedures and techniques. Surely until all those are exhausted. I mean, the Howard Crowhurst material is absolutely amazing to work out the mathematical knowledge that these people had, and geographically speaking, in their travelling around and so forth. So, you know, and what the main insult to all this is that all these people lived deeply part of a very prominent religion and religious practices with very specific beliefs. They don't do any research. To understand the people, you have to understand the religion. And the archaeologists keep very, very, very separate from the religion of these people. And, you know, you can poke around all you want on a trinket, but if you don't actually participate and engage in that religion, you won't learn anything of it. They don't even name the religion. And as you know, only now the Christians are starting to accept all these other religions, you know, Buddhism, Sikhism, Hinduism, all these other religions that are now welcome. They've just set up a Sikh court. But why do not we have any religion for the pre-conquest, the pre-Roman conquest? It seems it's the taboo religion, you know, the taboo ancestors, because you start to ask questions about before the conquest and before Christianity, and only now they've opened up to all the other existing religions. It's almost kind of like the subject they don't want you to study unless you go to South America, you know, into the middle of the jungle, and then it's okay to go into these subjects. So, you know, it's ironic, really. What I think it is, it's almost like there's no doubt about it. This is conquest, and this is the legacy of the conquest and religion is, it's picking the previous culture to pieces in the name of education, but they claim they're doing it for educational purposes. Yet, all of their relics and monuments are prestigiously protected. You got the police going and covering things up so protesters can't paint on it or whatsoever. They're heavily protective over it. What is there to learn about Jimmy Savile? We're unlikely to get the names of these people. But they seem obsessed with separating them from their trinkets, Why don't they get the trinkets out, look at them, take photographs, they don't even put them back. It's all in museums. The thing to do with that Wealreaf law is that everything gets separated and put in different museums and different places where that law is meant to, it's almost like rest in peace. There's no respect or dignity. And also the observations, people going around, perving at things. I don't mind museums, it's nice to go see objects and look at them, but they don't even keep them all in the same place. There's always learning and borrowing, things. Are they going, in another, 100 years, are they going to be, borrowing bits of Prince Charles's, fingers and sending them around and putting them in museums? Oh, look, there's one of Charles's, 3 of Charles's fingers, or 3 of Charles's toes, or here's one of his cancerous testicles, apparently, that, he's got cancer in his testicles or whatever it is, It's almost kind of like Madame Tussauds in a way, but even Madame Tussauds aren't the actual persons, they're wax replicas. Why don't these museums have wax replicas in there, or precision copies, It's maybe I should go to museums more. Maybe I haven't been to museums enough. But when it's somewhere far away, not even connected with the place, it's even worse. I don't think you can understand the objects anywhere near as even if you wanted to have an educational purpose on it, if it's not in its natural environment or with the people who actually made them. It's almost kind of like a fragment floating in space. So also there's something else I need to add as well now, besides that little briefing about the more obvious about the origins of the church and the educational department being of the same origins, yet seemingly there's a conflict of interest now in the deceased, the soul, the dead, ancestry and the education system, who seek to kind of almost pick it to pieces. In order to understand it, they need to pick it to pieces. Almost like to understand the tapestry, they need to unravel it all, and they don't seem to want to put it back together, but put all the separate parts in a museum. But anyway, so I don't think that I'm a person who gets much respect or accolade from people like Professor Darville, or Dareville even, or the prehistory guys, or, I don't know, really, but I don't have a qualification. I don't go to university, and my ideas and methods are quite different to what they teach them in university. But here, what I find, and this is a legitimate finding, is that when I was looking at the interpretation of Wealreaf, while I was looking for the interpretation of it, and looking at the letters and the runes and the wording in the Scandinavian language, I came across 2 letters. One of them is an E and one of them is the I, and the both have like an accentuation on them over the top of them. I don't even want to call it a hyphen or an accentuation, or now the law from the terms of Rochester and some of those ancient Edward the Confessor laws are meant to go back as far as 600, which is after the Roman conquest. And you're starting to come into, when you get to around 800 or 900, which is when you've got these, the Vikings and the Danes, the Nordic people, Scandinavian people moving over and attacking and encroaching in, and you've got all the issues of a lot of tombs and burials being opened in the north of Ireland, Scotland, by invaders who we know went in there into some of these burial places. And you've got, this is when they build the Clogteach Towers in Ireland, primarily in Ireland, the bell towers, the Clogteach Towers, like the traditional kind of wizards' towers. Not very many of them completely remaining intact. Now, the ironic thing is that I know that some of the Scandinavians drew the dragons, the sort of the dragon serpent symbol. That there's some engravings on some of the walls in the tombs from when they got ransacked and pillaged. But what I found is I actually taken this quite seriously. Really, it's quite a serious video. I mean, I challenge any academic. I haven't seen anyone bring this particular point up. It's relevant here. So when you get this letter I by itself, with the top of the letter is not just a dot, it kind of like slants off to the left slightly. It's saying that it means amongst, inside, within, or in a certain position, into, thereupon. Now, in the Book of Kells, there is this image here, which is one of the quite well-known and famous ones. And I've turned it on its side. I've turned it sideways. I've turned it 90 degrees to the right. But there's a character within and amongst all of the spiral patterns, the reels, the wheels, and the Celtic weaving knots in this Book of Kells plate. And it's quite a funny and comical part of it. But what it is it spirals round, and then it's got the head of a character on the top of it. So it's almost like, a letter I with the dot on, with the top on, but it goes around into a spiral, like a reel, or even a wreath. And it's within and amongst the image. Okay? It's within and amongst the image. Now, I actually believe that there is a connection between that and this letter here. Because the thing is, when they had the early developing Christian church, they were mixing a lot of ideas together. Now, the priests were the ones who had learned, they were the knowledge, the language, they knew the Latin language and the Celtic the Gaelic language, but also I would say the languages of these Scandinavian and Nordic people as well. So I think that character, which is almost like the head, his head is like the top of the eye, within and amongst, is actually curling around and within another kind of letter I that stood upright. And funnily enough, when you turn it on its side, the patterns definitely form a humanoid figure, almost like with kind of like a stag's headdress on, which looks like those ancient Celtic headdresses. I think there was one found in somewhere around North Yorkshire area. Is it Scarborough Man? I forgot what he's called, but actually, when I was looking at the letter F, there was one of those words that is meant to say deer. Actually, I've just been researching for some of the other letters, and the word deer came up. And it's like the figure of a person, the figure of a character within and amongst the patterns, right? Almost like you might find them within and amongst the earth. So there's definitely something going on there with that, which I wanted to point out. And then when we come on to this part here, okay, now this is one of the other letters I was researching when I was looking into that Wealreaf sentence. And it's the letter E. The letter E with another accentuation over the top of it. And it means always and forever. And if you look, it gives you a symbol. It actually gives you like if you want to call it a rune or a symbol next to it. Because that is the part of the sentence that I'm claiming is to do with being in the ground or buried, always and forever. And the shape of the rune, which is straight down with 2 intersections in it, we find that pattern here in the Book of Kells as well, on one of the other pages. If you look at it, right, can you see it has, on the right-hand side page there, goes straight down, and then 2 lines intersecting across the middle, which is the same shape as the rune for always and forever. Okay? That's not a coincidence. If any professor or academic or, anyone wants to challenge me on that, then, it's not a coincidence, right? I mean, if you think of the Lord's Prayer in the Christian faith, forever and ever, amen. I mean, they say it, forever and ever, amen. Right? It's part of some of the prayers. It's part of the well-established and renowned prayers for and ever. Amen. So there we've got for always, forever and ever. And then we have that symbol there in the Book of Kells, an entire page for a symbol. So you've definitely got this merging of Scandinavian and Celtic and the Latin together. And obviously, if in the Book of Kells it's about a religion, your religions are all about, spirit, bodies, burials, the deceased, and the whole, births, deaths, marriages. That's the area of religion. So Wealreaf is hot on that topic. What we don't get is people wanting to prove this ancient law is valid in Magna Carta, and encroaching on these ancient sites is illegal. I mean, a lot of them are protected anyway, but what you get is, the problem is that you still get vandalism. I mean, we get vandalism now. There was vandalism in the 1800s, but when you go, the problem is we're getting onto Magna Carta and the Great Charters and law. And that's when, within the Liberty of London, they were encouraging him to go find treasure and get treasure where we got it from or where it appeared from. It's not encouraging them to dig up the bodies of the ancestors. Claims that they've got prestige for the ancestors, but if they've got... The thing that troubles me about this Liberty of London, and it's ironic, I've got all these cases open with JCOI now, and they're all like intertwined in some kind of tapestry, because the legal argument for the ULEZ, which is no tolls within London, the Dartford crossing doesn't have tolls on it because it's part of the Liberty of London, and the Liberty of London is still enforced through the Great Charters. And when you read that, you find out about the treasure trove and the other laws that are in the Great Charter, and you find out people are digging up treasures and so forth, or encouraged to, and then keep them. Obviously, now if you find any treasure, that's you got to hand it in. It's property of the Queen or whatever. But this Wealreaf, I don't think it's property. How can it be property of the Queen, or even going to the universities and museums, when Wealreaf makes it illegal to dig it up, and it's meant to remain with the ancestors to preserve their nobility and identity, right? There's a very prominent conflict of interest in these laws. And what you do is you get people joking about it, like the prehistory guys make a joke. Although they're very serious, they're a very, very, very serious couple of people, pair of guys. They take it very professionally and very seriously, their program, edited and produced to the highest standards. Yet, it's a serious subject. We've got people like Tim Darville tinkering around, right? And this is when you get problems like in Ireland, with the Troubles, right? Because these subjects, you can't potter and poke around like a professor, in an archaeology department and have, it's all funny and a laugh, right? When people are poking around with people's ancestry and even admitting that, it's destructive by nature, what a shame. Oh, that's too bad, isn't it, right? And then we've got serious legal problems. We've got petition signatures, very large numbers of petition signatures for opposing the Stonehenge Tunnel. And we've got £60,000 legal cases, to try and stop it. Yet we've got these pro tunnel people like Tim Darville who are on a jolly adventure for their own prestige. They want the title Prof in front of their name. They want the documentation in the archives. They want their name in the archives, in the books. They want to turn up at the presentation with everyone clapping. They want the honours, the academia, the rewards. They want to be decorated, honoured, right? But to achieve that, what they're doing is they're digging up other people's honours and ancestry and pulling it to pieces, unravelling it all, and then saying, "Oh, now I understand it." But when there's nothing left to understand, because what they've done is they've got the tapestry and they've unravelled it all. In order for them, they need to unravel it to understand it. And the thing with Newgrange on the side of the carving, you don't unravel that because it's set in stone. It's set in stone in the carving, the symbol, the seagull on the wall, unless you rub it and wear it off, but then it's gone. I mean, what do you do, once it's worn away? This is the problem. It's ironic that these professors and these academics, they get their acknowledgement and their nobility, their prestige from the back of other people's achievements. That's the thing, they don't just go and do it from scratch. It's always, other people's, it's always built on other people's achievements, and a lot of them are pulled to pieces, So this Wealreaf law, if valid, it cannot be overridden. You cannot have a permission to override it because all orders made against the Great Charters are illegal. I think the church have been trying to cover it up and hide it, and that's why the translation's not full in its entirety on the Rochester Cathedral site. That's my opinion. So I've got to challenge the Archbishop of Canterbury on that. It's quite a serious claim, because otherwise this law has got a conflict of interest. It preserves the ancestry and history, but it obstructs the university and education, and it renders a lot of their activities illegal, criminal. So they're not going to want to hand themselves into a police station and say, we broke the law. So it's been set up now that it's in their interests to be criminal, to break the law, because their work requires them to be criminals. It's like the police. Really, it's like the police, but not in the name of policing. It's in the name of education. Oh, I had to kick a door down. We had to break a tomb open. We had to smash a window through. We had to possess drugs. It's ironic. The university now is almost like the police. Oh, we're catching criminals, or now we're trying to understand history. Well, you didn't need to break the door down to catch the criminal. You could have waited till they come back out again. You didn't need to pull the tomb to bits. You could have waited till a new scan comes where you just go straight through the rock, straight through the wall. So you don't even need to open it. You can just give it a complete, like an MRI scan or whatever, or even more, whatever equipment's coming. So there's this patience thing. We have to be patient, but they don't have to be patient. Like I'm finding out things now from this that I haven't seen anyone do a Scandinavian translation interpretation of the Book of Kells. It's always given accreditation for being purely Celtic, although some of the Ogham writing is lines through intersecting lines, but they're usually at an angle or diagonal. But I think that within the book, being within the book always and forever, so that's important. Going back to the subject of the actual translation again, so I do think that my translation is not invalid. I think that it's probably not 100% accurate, but I think that I've brought a lot more of the meaning out than what we've so far been given by the other websites that are on there, which is why I'm going to try and seek a professional, confirmed translation, right? Because I don't think the current ones are complete. Don't think it's a thorough, complete transcription or translation, right? I think mine's more thorough. So, we've got conflict of interest. There are some very, very, very prominent conflicts of interest, and I don't think those conflicts of interest are brought up in the Department of Transport. The thing now is that the universities and the archaeology sector is teamed up and has got new deals with the highways. So when the highways find anything, they're paying for the education sector to go investigate. They're paying for all their expenses and costs so they can go poke around, and then they pay for it all. So it's almost like a handshake, and then they can build a big highway bridge through Perthshire or Stonehenge Tunnel when it's actually illegal. They're like juggernauts. Nothing stops for these people, So this is it's costing Stonehenge Alliance like £60,000 that people have donated to do this legal challenge. Yet, I find that there's serious. I'm claiming it's against the Great Charter. So I'm claiming it's against the Great Charter, and for that, there can be no there is no legal contest. All orders made through the courts are void. The statutory instrument is void. Now, this has not been raised yet. Apparently, the appeal is also currently being still evaluated, whether they're allowed to appeal or not. But, the statutory instrument is invalid. It can't be valid for reasons I pointed out in my other paper. Now, the JCOI complaint, I haven't shared or published the actual paper that I wrote. This is attached evidence, but the problem is there are petitions ongoing to Parliament under Parliament's jurisdiction, and this is part of that. I have to tell people about this because people are signing the petitions, and the case has been taken to Parliament. It's been heard in Parliament. And that's a problem Judicial Conduct Investigations Office needs to understand, which is that you can have cases. You've got the Constitutional Reform Act 2005, Section 5, which is representations with the House of Commons, right? But there's something odd going. When you raise a matter to Parliament, your elected MPs are meant to be representing you, and you don't pay for them like solicitors. But what we find is we're going back into the courts again with this, and even though people have collected 200,000 signatures, now they're having to collect £60,000, and they don't even know whether they're allowed to appeal. You don't have to get permission to. You don't need permission to petition Parliament. That's for sure. So why would you need permission to appeal in the courts? It's this whole Stonehenge Tunnel thing now with the matter of this Wealreaf law adds an entire new element, and the fact that they're yo-yoing it back and forwards now between Parliament and the courts, and now I'm going through JCOI because it's a serious complaint. I'm going to have to insist to the Lady Chief Justice that she is part of the Privy Council, and so is the Archbishop of Canterbury, right? And for that reason, because this Wealreaf interpretation currently, the main evidence that we've got is relying upon the Rochester Cathedral website. And because that is under the remit of the Archbishop of Canterbury, and I'm challenging that that interpretation is correct, I am going to have to require the Lady Chief Justice through the JCOI to have the Archbishop of Canterbury give professional witness evidence in my complaint. Because when I'm bringing a complaint in the office, it's a case and I've got a caseworker. And that caseworker is an investigator, right? And it's paid for by, I pay for it with my tax. We all pay for the JCOI with our taxes, right? So in my investigation through Judicial Conduct Investigations Office, and the Lady Chief Justice is in charge of the office, she's the head of the office, I need her colleague, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Primate of all England, I need him as professional witness in my complaint to JCOI, because I need the correct interpretation of Wealreaf thoroughly, correctly, not the trimmed down version that's on their Rochester Cathedral website, right? Purporting to be the translation when it's nowhere near the full translation. And I need to know whether or not that professional witness, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Sir Justin Welby, the Primate of all England, I need to know whether there is any conflict of interest in his evidence, right? Which may be protecting the universities and professors who all originate from the church doing their work. Because there's a conflict of interest here. And I cannot see it happening where the universities and the archaeology sector is going to come forward and say, oh, I'm sorry, we're all criminals, you know. They want to carry on doing what they're doing. It's like the police coming forward and saying, oh, sorry, we kicked all those doors down and we smashed all those windows and we took all those drugs, but it was all in the name of upholding the law. You know, they're not going to stop doing it. They want to carry on doing it. Now, the thing is, the law says that they can do it in certain situations. This Wealreaf law says that when we interpret it, if it's under, we know it's under the Great Charters, that you can't get permission. All orders which are in contravention of the Great Charters are illegal, unlawful. So that means that you can't have a permission. You can't get it. It's not possible. Now, they're going to fight that, and they're not going to want to admit that because they want to continue doing what they're doing, right? It's just impossible to have a contravention of the Great Charter. It's not possible. I mean, even Neil Oliver, who's against all this corporate interest and world takeover from BlackRock Vanguard and all this Highways England ripping up the whole countryside. Neil Oliver's an archaeologist, and his lifetime career has been, archaeology and digging up places. So we've actually got a big problem, and that Stonehenge tunnel is a big project, and there's going to be a lot of deceased persons and dead bodies under that amount of ground. So. It's quite serious. I'm right. I'm within my rights, and it's correct to take it up with JCOI because on the merit of, according to Magna Carta, that statutory instrument is void. It's not valid. So that's as far as I'm concerned. It's void and invalid, and it's needs annulling. That's where I am with it, and I think that that they're probably going to have to now. I'm going to have to insist to JCOI that they get the Archbishop of Canterbury to give evidence to the Lady Chief Justice on this. And I don't have much faith in them wanting to confirm my findings, even if they're correct, because it renders a lot of the university work criminal over the years. I don't know what you're doing in this situation, because it's almost like an internal conflict in a way within the church and government. And we've got people flaunting the law. Just look now in the elections. We've got there are councillors who are advertising and promoting, giving election advice. When that's illegal, they're blatantly doing it out in the open. That's another case. Simon Forthrop from Bromley Council. He's assisting and affecting elections on behalf of the council. So we've got problems.